Last week, Canada's Minister of National Defence, Bill Blair, announced that Canada will be contributing another $35 million worth of equipment and training to the Armed Forces of Ukraine, or the AFU. Since 2014, Canada's donated over $8.5 billion in military hardware and cash to support Ukraine's government and build the capacity of the AFU. Most of that aid being delivered after Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. It is time to target just how much aid Canada and NATO can continue to support the war in Ukraine. To the average Canadian taxpayer struggling to pay a mortgage and with the growing concerns over our failing healthcare systems, that might sound like a lot of money. However, to embattled Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, this amounts to a mere pittance compared to the vast sum he requires to continue resisting the Russian invasion. On his most recent visit to the USA to plead for funds from US Congress, Zelensky was hoping for $60 billion in immediate relief. Instead, he returned to Kyiv having only secured a mere $250 million, mostly in the form of ammunition from the US military. It's not chump change, but it's nowhere near what Ukraine needs to stay in the fight. Also worthy of note from Blair's announcement was the type of equipment which Canada is giving to Ukraine. The bulk of the $35 million donation will be in the form of 10 Zodiac Hurricane rigid hull inflatable boats, known as RIBs. Now, these are excellent pieces of kit, mainly used by Canada's Special Forces operatives for amphibious clandestine operations. As a close observer of the war in Ukraine to date, I realize that Ukraine has launched a few raids across the Dnieper River into Russian-held territory on the East Bank. However, these have been brief sideshows compared to the land-based trench warfare slugfest of attrition taking place on the vast steppes of Ukraine or in urban battles akin to the World War II Battle of Stalingrad. What the AFU desperately needs is artillery ammunition, drones, combat aircraft, low-level air defense systems, and manpower. Canada is sending them 10 Zodiac boats instead.
There's a consensus, I think, among most Canadians that this is the right fight to support. That Canada and all of our partners have a responsibility here to be there for them.
To be fair, Canada has in the past donated 4 M777 155mm howitzers to Ukraine along with much of our own artillery shells. We subsequently purchased 20,000 155mm howitzer shells from the US government to be delivered directly to Ukraine. In total, Canada has provided Ukraine with what seems like a whopping 40,000 heavy artillery shells thus far in the war. However, when you factor in that the conflict has been raging for almost 2 years, and Ukraine expends on average 5,000 rounds of artillery daily, Canada has only provided 8 days worth of ammo, or 1% of the shells fired to date. It is no longer the consideration of the cost when it comes to artillery shells. The US and NATO allies simply cannot produce enough to keep pace with the expenditure in Ukraine. Prior to 2022, the US produced just 14,000 155mm shells per month. That production has been doubled to 28,000 a month currently, but Ukraine needs 200,000 shells a month. You do not need a degree in mathematics to realize those numbers are not sustainable. Also of note is the fact that in the capitalist tradition of a product's market value being based on the ratio of supply versus demand, due to this production shortfall, the cost per 155mm artillery round has quadrupled from $2,000 per shell in 2022 to over $8,000 currently. It would seem that the US arms industry does indeed stand with Ukraine. In this case, all the way to the bank. This has been On Target. I'm Scott Taylor.